October 3rd, 1993, Mogadishu, Somalia. The world watches in horror as two American Black Hawk helicopters are shot down in the heart of the city. 18 American soldiers are killed, 84 wounded. The bodies of dead American troops are dragged through the streets by angry mobs. The images shock the nation and change US foreign policy forever. This became known as the Battle of Mogadishu, or as most people would later know it through the Hollywood film, Black Hawk Down. But what many don't know is the story of what led to that fateful day. What turned an entire city against American forces? What transformed a humanitarian mission to feed the starving into urban warfare? A 17-minute operation that would change everything. A devastating raid that most history books never mention. An attack that would become known as Bloody Monday. It all started with a Monday morning in Mogadishu, July the 12th, 1993. The sun beats down on a two-story villa in Hodan district. Inside, nearly 100 people have gathered. Their clan elders, intellectuals, former judges, poets, and community leaders. They're there to discuss peace. 3 days earlier, some of them had met with American Admiral Jonathan Howe, the UN Special Representative, exploring ways to end the escalating violence between UN forces and local militia. But at 10:18 a.m., everything changed. A CIA informant walks out of the villa's main gate, wearing pre-arranged clothing. A signal. High above, 17 helicopters hover in position, waiting. 6 Cobra gunships, 4 Kiowa scouts, multiple Black Hawks. They surround the villa like predators circling their prey. At 10:19 a.m., without warning, the sky erupts. The first TOW missile crashes through the second-story wall, flying just past Abdi Quaybdid Awali's face as he stands to address the crowd of nearly 100 civilians, elders, and community leaders. Through the new hole in the wall, he sees a terrifying sight: a wall of helicopters hovering at eye level, their weapons trained directly on the building. A minute later, at 10:20 a.m., another missile strikes, then another and another. It was a ruthless and efficient strategy. First, take out the conference room where everyone was gathered, then blow up the stairwells to block any chance of escape, and finally target the roof to finish off anyone who might still be inside. As you can imagine, the scene inside was apocalyptic. One survivor named Farah described it like, "There was a flash of light and a violent crack. Thick smoke filled the room. He tried to move forward, but his way was blocked by bodies. A bloody pile of men and parts of men, a meter high." By 10:21 a.m., hell has broken loose inside. The oldest and most respected clan member, Sheikh Haji Mohammed Iman Aden, over 90 years old, is already dead. He'd been sitting against the wall when the first missile hit. In the air, there's an acrid smell of gunpowder mixing with the metallic stench of blood. By 10:23 a.m., the helicopters have fired 16 TOW missiles and unleashed 2,200 rounds of 20mm cannon fire. 6 minutes of non-stop bombardment. Those who made it through the first wave had a brutal decision to make: stay in the burning building or jump from the second floor. Most chose to jump, but the nightmare didn't end there. At 10:24 a.m., 3 Black Hawks touch down in the street. 53 American ground troops pour out, storming the compound, while other helicopters drop CS gas grenades to disperse the growing crowd of horrified onlookers. The soldiers move through the rubble, searching for survivors. By 10:35 a.m., the last American soldier boards the final departing helicopter. 17 minutes. That's all it took. Just 17 minutes to turn what was supposed to be a humanitarian mission into a full-blown war. In that short time, an entire city turned against American forces, and those 17 minutes would go down in history, directly leading to what we now know as Black Hawk Down. UN officials initially claimed only 7 people had died, all of them combatants, but hospitals had a different story to tell. The International Committee of the Red Cross counted 54 dead and 161 wounded. Local sources reported an even higher toll, 73 dead and 200 wounded. Among the dead were some of Somalia's most respected peace advocates, including Sheikh Haji Mohammed Iman Aden, the senior elder of the Habar Gida clan. But to understand why this happened, Why American helicopters would unleash such devastating firepower on a villa full of civilians, we need to go back to the beginning of the UN intervention in Somalia, back to when a humanitarian mission to feed the hungry transformed into something else. The story begins in 1992. Somalia was in chaos. Civil war had torn the country apart. Warlords controlled different regions, fighting each other while their people starved. The images shocked the world. Emaciated children, failed harvests, widespread famine. The United Nations stepped in with Operation Restore Hope. The mission was simple: protect food aid deliveries and help feed the starving population. But by 1993, the mission had changed. What started as a humanitarian operation had evolved into a nation-building exercise. The UN, with American forces at the forefront, found itself drawn into Somalia's complex clan politics. The main focus became capturing one man, General Mohammed Farrar Aidid, leader of the Somali National Alliance. The turning point came on June 5, 1993. 24 Pakistani peacekeepers were killed in an ambush. The UN Security Council responded with Resolution 837, calling for the arrest of those responsible. Though Aidid wasn't named directly, everyone knew who the resolution targeted. What followed was an escalating cycle of violence. The UN launched AC-130 gunship strikes on suspected SNA sites. The SNA responded with ambushes, mortar attacks, and assassinations on Somali UN employees. But capturing Aidid was frustratingly difficult. Every attempt ended in failure. The man seemed to be a ghost, always one step ahead of their operations. The UN's credibility was on the line. They needed results. By July 1993, UN military commanders were getting desperate. They wanted a win. No, they needed it. They needed to show progress in their hunt for Aidid. That's when CIA intelligence arrived about regular meetings being held at a particular villa in the Hodan district of Mogadishu. The villa belonged to Abdi Kabdir Awali, Aidid's interior minister, and it was known as a gathering place for the Habar Gira clan, Aidid's power base. If they couldn't catch Aidid himself, perhaps they could cripple his support network. On July the 7th, American forces began planning what would become Operation Michigan, a coordinated air raid and ground assault that would be unlike anything they had attempted before. Previous raids had targeted weapons caches or empty buildings. This time, they would target people. The Turkish commander of UN forces, General Civic Bir, was convinced this would be the operation that would break Aidid's power. "I will kill Aidid within 4 days," he declared privately on July the 9th. His confidence was shared by other military leaders who saw this as their chance to finally show progress in their mission. The operation broke from everything that had been done before. There was no warning before the attack, something totally out of line with standard procedure. The commanders said it was necessary because in the past, targets had escaped after warnings were given, and UN military leaders were frustrated after a string of failed operations where targets got away, and they were also worried about the safety of their own troops. The SNA had been using human shields to test the limits of UN rules of engagement, and the commanders ultimately decided that the risk to civilian lives was worth taking if it meant military advantages. So, the White House gave the green light for the operation. There's still some debate about whether President Clinton knew that Somalis were being directly targeted when he approved it, but that's besides the point now. The irony is that the meeting the UN was aiming for wasn't what they thought it was. It wasn't a war council of hardliners, it was actually a peace conference. The same elders who had met with Admiral Howe just 3 days earlier to discuss peace were now there to share those discussions with their community. In fact, Aidid himself had disapproved of the meeting. All of the elders and leaders of the Habar Gira clan were present, most of them opposed to the military stance Aidid was taking against the UN. The meeting was about forcing Aidid to comply with UNASOM II. What's more, the meeting's purpose had even been publicized in Mogadishu's newspapers the day before. It was no secret, but somewhere, somehow, the intelligence got twisted. A CIA informant inside the clan passed word that some of those who had participated in the June 5th attack on Pakistani peacekeepers would be present. And so, on that Monday morning, the helicopters took their positions. They waited for a signal, a CIA informant walking out of the meeting wearing pre-arranged clothing. When they saw it, they opened fire. As news of the attack spread, enraged crowds gathered at the site. When foreign journalists arrived to cover the story, the crowd turned on them. 4 journalists were killed, their bodies mutilated. Most Western news organizations withdrew from Somalia completely, which is why there would be so little press coverage of Black Hawk Down 3 months later. The raid changed everything. Before July the 12th, many Somalis had supported the UN mission, or at least viewed it neutrally. After the raids, that changed. Even Aidid's rivals couldn't publicly support the operation. The outrage was too profound. The UN's credibility was shattered. The very same elders who had met with Admiral Howe to discuss peace had been killed in the attack. Abdikasim Salat Hassan, a prominent moderate who had been pushing for a diplomatic solution, gave up his efforts. To the Somali people, particularly the Habar Gide clan, this wasn't peacekeeping anymore. This was war. Then, the violence in Mogadishu shot up dramatically. Parts of the city plunged into near anarchy. UN positions were attacked every day, and night patrols had to be called off. The SNA even put out bounties for American soldiers and UN personnel. Attacks doubled in July and August. It was pure chaos. Before July the 12th, American troops were mostly attacked because they were tied to the UN. But after the raids, Aidid made a major shift. American soldiers were now specifically targeted, and it was precisely this shift in strategy that led directly to the events of August the 8th, 1993, when 4 American soldiers were killed by a landmine. The attack prompted President Clinton to send in Delta Force and the Rangers to capture Aidid, and that decision would lead to the Battle of Mogadishu, Black Hawk Down, on October the 3rd and 4th, 1993. The Bloody Monday raid was designed to destroy Aidid's power base. Instead, it united the city behind him. It turned moderates into hardliners, it transformed a humanitarian mission into a combat operation, and it set the stage for a battle that would change American military policy for years to come. The Bloody Monday raid is mostly forgotten today, overshadowed by the more dramatic events of Black Hawk Down. But understanding what happened on July the 12th, 1993 is key to understanding why Black Hawk Down even happened in the first place. If you want to hear more untold stories from history's darkest corners, be sure to like and subscribe. See you next time.